Hey everyone, my name's Lily and I'm the book blogger behind Utopia State of Mind, and today I'm going to be chatting about my February wrap up. Um, these are I actually read 31 books in February, so these are just the physical ones that I read. Such a fantastic group, and actually, so many of my favorites are also in this pile, so it's really nice that I'll have books to show you as I talk to you about them. So, the first thing that I want to chat about in my February wrap up is just a quick rundown of the stats. So, as I said, I've read 31 books in February. 52% of them featured people of color as the main characters, and 41% of those featured queer characters as the main characters. I also everyone to make the point of saying as main characters because these books or other books may have side characters, but I'm only talking about main characters in the stats. Um, the first one is that I guess just a general update. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below if you want like the general slash personal updates at the beginning or the end of the video. In my mind, I kind of think of them as in the beginning of the video, as I first tell you how many books I read, and then I reflect upon with you how that went. So the first is that March has a lot of panels. You will have seen the last video, which is a panel breakdown of all the panels that I have in March. On almost every weekend day in March, I have a panel that I'm moderating. And I say almost every because on one day I'm moderating two panels. So it actually evens out to be every March weekend day. So definitely check out that video if you haven't already, about all of the different panels that are going on in March. I kind of, when I was writing out the emails to people, and it's been a while since I first contacted people, and scheduling can take a while. And so I only realized as I was making graphics and like writing down all the dates for the graphics, how many panels there were. I'm personally very excited, but because of that, it meant that my February reading wrap up or my February reading month was just full of books I needed to read for panels. I'm still reading books for these panels. But all of these books have been so fantastic. I'm very, very grateful, but it just has meant a lot of work in February. So, as far as a kind of knitting personal life update, the person behind the reader, right? That's what I'm calling this part of the series. The first one is, as you can tell, I injured my wrist. How did I injure my wrist? Well, I taught myself to crochet. And since I've been very public on the internet about this, a lot of people who have been crocheting better than me and for longer than me have been like, how did this happen? So I'm just going to explain that because I've gotten this comment or this like message from people every time I've posted about it. So the story is, I will insert footage here so you can hear like a little story time as you see what I've made. I made a plant pot and little monstera leaf coasters, which I 100% saw on TikTok. All of the tutorials that I used are on YouTube, so I will link them below, or if anyone's interested, also maybe the TikTok I found that show it in action. But I first started off with the plant pot, and this was only my second crochet project. I had done my first crochet project, a hat. I will show you that after this. And so this was my second crochet project. I went from a 10 millimeter hook to a 4 millimeter hook, which is a huge difference. My tension for the whole pot had been super, super tight. I was having a really hard time with it being so tight, and I kept like loosening as it went on, but it still ended up being really tight. Then when I was doing the lip of the pot, my crochet hook broke. So the top part of the hook bit, broke from the handle. And so I didn't have another crochet hook. This was my first ever like foray really into crocheting. So it's not like I had spare hooks. And so I thought, okay, how much worse can it be if I just like finish this, right? With this tiny, tiny hook, right? It's not a big deal. It was so hard. I lost it was just really, really difficult. And I think that's what ultimately hurt my wrist was like that holding on to that like whatever 1 inch crochet hook, and still having those really tight stitches. It just made it so that after that it kind of ached, and then as I was working on the leaves, which I only did like 2 leaves a day, so it wasn't really bad, and by the end I could do about 2 leaves in half an hour roughly. But by the end of the leaf making process, because I was making this for a housewarming, at the end of the leaf making process, my wrist was just really kind of hurting, and it only ended up hurting more. But I've been resting it and not doing anything. I haven't really been able to type, which is why there's a review backlog. but I've been resting it for, at this point, as I'm filming it, about a week after the injury of like really no, very, very limited use. And to be fair, it is almost fully there, but I'm using this brace to kind of protect the progress that I've made. So anyway, I love the plant pot. I think it's so cute. I'm really glad that my friend liked it. I wasn't sure. But I love the plant pot. It fits a coaster really nicely. I tested it on many cups. I think it's really adorable. I'm planning on making one for other people in my life. So yeah, now I'm going to talk to you. I'll just show you the hat that I had made. This is the 10 millimeter beanie. It's actually quite large, but it is surprisingly now the only beanie that I have that actually fits cuffed over my ears. I don't know why beanies don't do that. And also over my head. I kind of have a wide head. And so it fits really nicely. In hindsight, the pattern that I found online with this yarn said to do 10 millimeter hook. But in hindsight, I think I should have done 9 millimeters because the weave is just kind of more open than I would want for a winter beanie. But it was my first ever project. I think it looks okay. I had a hard time with the back loops, but anyway. But earlier, this was basically in the last half of February, and so earlier in February, I finished a project that I'll have to continue because I ran out of yarn. So I'll just show it to you now. It is this seed stitch scarf. It is patterned. The pattern I used was the All Too Well scarf pattern, but it's basically just a bunch of seed stitches. The yarn has this really lovely gradient. I had to double up on the yarn so it was like thicker for a fall to winter scarf. But it's not done. It's not long enough. It was also supposed to have tassels. So it's not done. It's kind of like on a loop, and I will finish it when I get yarn. And then finally, my lovely assistant seamed my Evermore cardigan, or my fake Evermore cardigan here. I haven't weaved in the ends yet, but here's the completed thing. The sleeves are in a different wool. I think I talked about that in the last wrap-up video. So here it is. I'm in love with it. I think it looks so, so gorgeous. I'm already thinking about doing one in other colors, like a dark green and light green. That's kind of, or a dark midnight blue. A dark midnight blue and a lighter blue, or a white. Like, already I'm thinking about other different combinations. So I really enjoyed that. And yeah, those were my kind of updates behind the reader. TLDR, February was very stressful, got injured, still made some really beautiful things. So now I want to talk in my wrap-up video now about these series starters. I have 3 series starters to chat with you about. The first one is 7 Faceless Saints. Hold on, I have it here. Is 7 Faceless Saints. I loved this book so much. I loved the world building. I loved this idea of saints, but also magical kind of abilities. And what I really also loved about this book is that it has to explore authority and what happens when we think that the world is one way, but it's not that way, or we don't think it's that way, right? Like this idea of history being manipulated, but also the current times being manipulated as well. And also a little bit of this idea that our lives should be serving this grander purpose, but it's kind of like, do they have to? Like, is everything going to be in pursuit of these larger goals that don't have anything to do with us, basically? So I love 7 Faceless Saints. It is the beginning of a duology. I'm so excited for the second part of the duology, and there's going to be some really gorgeous additions of 7 Faceless Saints, I think. The next one is the Foxglove King. Yes, I'm just checking my list. The next one is the Foxglove King. I really, really loved the Foxglove King because I love necromancy in fantasy worlds. That's just kind of a thing that I really love. So the Foxglove King combines necromancy, poison running. It has kind of like, on one hand, an urban-ish fantasy setting. It's set in a city, but also there's these court politics. So all of that kind of in one book. It also, one of the things I love, I can't really talk about it because it has to do with kind of the last 20%. But I loved the world building so much. It's definitely a different vibe than For the Throne and For the Wolf, but I loved it. I think it's decadent. I think it's also dangerous. and it's a story, kind of like Seven Faces Saints, where it also talks about personal history, world history, and the implications of that, and sort of power and different classes in society as well. It's so fantastic. I think this is going to be a trilogy, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, I'm so excited for this one. Also, all the arcs that I am bringing up or like holding up were sent to me by the publishers. So thank you so much to them for giving them to me. The next one that I want to talk about is That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. This is the first of the Mead Mishaps stories. This one was just so fun. There's such a great balance between like larger world stakes and also personal stakes and character development and character dynamic. It was just such a fun thing to read. I was reading this before bed, and every night I was so excited to read it. I loved the world. I thought it was really cute. The banter, the romance, everything was just so wonderful. It's going to be a series, and I'm already planning on when I can start reading the sequel. So I knew I had to include that as well, just because of how precious it was. And just, yeah, just like fun and cozy at the same time. So those are the series starters that I'm mentioning today. The sci-fi fantasy category is by far the largest I think that I've had in a very, very long time. So let's just get into it. I'm gonna start off with, I need to go according to the list, even though that's not how it is here. So the first one is Last Violent Call, which of course I was going to adore. It's like, as Chloe has described it, 100 pages of domestic fluff. It is just, it added years to my soul. It is just so precious. It's like fulfillment of happiness and happy endings that you've wanted this entire series. It's also such a fantastic bridge between these other worlds and other characters and other threads of the story in the world. For Foul Heart Huntsman, there are things that not only sort of move the characters along, but also bring the threads together for the next one. I think this is such a perfect kind of bridge between Our Violent Ends and not Our Violent Ends, I guess Foul Lady Fortune and Foul Heart Huntsman. And also just this was so cute and precious. I loved it so much. It's basically two novellas. And I don't want to say too much about it, because if you haven't read These Violent Ends and These Violent Delights, Our Violent Ends, and Foul Lady Fortune, I don't want to give too much about it because it kind of has a little bit of spoilers. But anyway, so fantastic. I loved it so much. The next one is Thronebreakers. This is the duology ender. I'm just checking my notes. This is the duology ender of the Crown Chasers duology. I finally read it. It was everything I wanted it to be and more. There's like so much more rebellion in this book. The characters really have to think about power and what they will do with it. I feel like at the end of Crown Chasers, without delving into spoilers so much, we are really talking about revenge and what happens. Like, everyone is doing this like case for the crown, but what are they going to do with it? And I think that Thronebreakers not only is having to wrap up some loose ends from Crown Chasers, but it's also talking about what we do with the power once we have it, and the kind of nefarious influences in our life that also love power. So I really loved Thronebreakers. I'm so happy I read it. I'm really happy that I have it. This is just such a stunning sci-fi duology. The next one is Blood Debts, which is a YA fantasy debut. This was fantastic. Not only does it give you a really gorgeous New Orleans setting with fantastical magic and fantasy families, or like magical families, it also deeply looks at the distinctions between the families, between the powers and where their powers come from. It goes into like the racism within the United States and how that impacts the world building. I loved this like deeper discussion about the origins of magic and the origins of power. And also there's such a story of family and also siblings, like these two siblings at the front of the book who have to figure out what their relationships are to each other, but also to their family, and to sacrifice, and generational secrets and kind of generational trauma as well is so brilliantly discussed. But also there's just this core of family and discovery, and also power and self-discovery. Like, it is just so fabulous. I think I was reading I think about halfway, or like, I think halfway through, when I emailed the author and I was like, hey, can we chat about this? As in, like, could we do a panel? Not like, could we chat, on the side, but could we do a panel for Blood Debts? And I hope that you will see that in a later YA debut panel, because this was just such a fantastic, compelling, gripping YA fantasy. The next one is Some Desperate Glory. This is a adult sci-fi. I need to make that clear. I realized that I said the YA sci-fi for Thronebreakers, but Some Desperate Glory is the only other sci-fi, and it's an adult sci-fi. And it really, really delves into this idea of propaganda and this idea of being at impressionable ages, wanting to believe what you're told. I loved it so much. There are so many things I want to say about it, which I can't. But it is a story really deeply woven about character journey and character development in a world that is very difficult. At the beginning of the world, our main character is brought up as like a freedom or a fighter for Earth, humanity. Earth has kind of been like destroyed. I can't exactly remember what exactly happened to it, but it's been destroyed, like, to say the least. And so they're this kind of group that are trying to enact revenge, or not enact revenge. They think it as enacting justice, but it's very clear to the readers that it ends up being about more than just justice and more about kind of revenge and payback. And for people growing up within the society, there's also really intense reproductive politics, and there's also kind of a eugenics vibe. But basically, there's this idea that everyone is going towards this duty to kind of reclaim Earth, or reclaim for humanity the justice that they are deserved. And so this makes the main character really have to struggle and work to realize what happens when our personal ambitions, but also our personal kind of consciousness, is going against the things that we've been told in this system, and what other modes of life exists, and how could we reclaim it, how could we have that. Like, it is just kind of that at a core, but then the sci-fi elements only kind of increase the longer the plot goes on in really fantastic ways that I can't talk about. But that's the core of the story. Her journey about her identity, about queer identity, but also about her place in society, the world, her family. Like, it's a lot of questioning, and I think that's why I really loved Some Desperate Glory. It talks about glory, duty, responsibility, loyalty, family, all of these things in a sci-fi setting that make it so compelling, and the action that really ramps up at the end just made it, like, it made me just really enjoy it at the end. And I had a really fun time reading Some Desperate Glory, even though it was emotionally very heart-wrenching, and so that's why I would recommend Some Desperate Glory. The next one is Where Darkness Blooms. This is like a YA horror, YA fantastical, supernaturally horror. I really loved this. It talks about family, it talks about friendship. Friendship is at the core of Where Darkness Blooms. The fantastical horror element was just so beautifully there. It's kind of just, it's like subtle until it's not, okay? And when it becomes the not subtle, that's when I was like, whoa, this is fantastic. The characters in it, it's kind of like multiple perspective. We go through all of these different friendships, and I loved that element, and I love that attention to detail, the way that their friendships are rooting the story, and the ways that, like, the town and the town politics influences themselves, their concepts of identity. It was just a YA horror that I ended up enjoying so much, even though horror is not normally my thing. I'm reading a lot more of it in general, but it was just so fabulous. If you love horror, you definitely should read it. And if you don't, like me, you still should read it, because I think the core of it is really friendship and sacrifice, and also a little bit of, like, mystery. There's also mystery related to where their mothers are, and the mystery of the town and what's happening in the town. I have so many notes where it's like, this town is bad, like, this town is wrong, something is going on here. And Where Darkness Blooms just was so fabulous. Also, the cover is, like, kind of terrifying. Okay, the next one is Bitter Medicine. This is an adult fantasy debut. I loved Bitter Medicine so much. It has the perfect, in my opinion, balance between character development and romance elements, and also fantasy, it also felt kind of cozy in the sense that it talks so much about personal ambition and family duty, family loyalty, and also responsibility. Like the stakes felt very central to the characters. It's not necessarily a book where like the world is, going to collapse and how can we save it. It's very much a story grounded in here are like the issues that I'm facing as a character, right? I have these duties. I don't know what to do with this responsibility or with these morals. How do I make sure that I'm living like the self that I want to be? And also kind of like I have a family duty. Who am I outside of my family? I love one of the lines in Bitter Medicine, and one of the reasons why I love Bitter Medicine was it really talks about who we are, and being loved, appreciated, seen for who we are and not what we can do for someone. Like that just, when I got to that part, I was just smitten. That it was just game over for me at that part, and I just loved it even more ever since. The next one I really loved was Garlic and the Vampire. This was just such a cute graphic novel where they're all like vegetables, except there are some humans and there is a vampire, but like the main character is a garlic head. I loved kind of the cute sneak peek we get into why these vegetables are kind of sentient, existing people, and also how it delves into expectations and first impressions or what we think of a person that we might not have met. I thought it was a really cute, fun middle grade graphic novel that uses these vegetables to kind of talk about these ideas of prejudice and these ideas of not judging people before you've met them, before you've gotten to know them. So just so cute. I had seen a lot of people be like, oh, I really loved Garlic and the Vampire, but I'd seen that last year. And so I'm really happy to continue that train for people who love Garlic and the Vampire. And then last one is She Is a Haunting. This is an early art cover, so it only has blurbs on it. But I loved She's a Haunting so much. It's another like YA horror mystery suspense, kind of like Where Darkness Blooms. But I also love that this is set in Vietnam, and it is so rooted in the colonization of Vietnam and the generational trauma, but also the past history and trauma and conflict in Vietnam with the French, and about like the way that the Vietnamese are seen as kind of like outsiders to the French people who came, but like that's not the case. And so I felt like She Is a Haunting has these elements of horror, but it also has these elements of family struggles and her like reconciling her relationship with her father, but it also is so deeply rooted in the time, in the place, in her place in the family, being a diaspora kid. Like it is just one of those books that so expertly works on these multiple different levels. I just loved it so much, and I hope that everyone reads it. The comps for the back was Mexican Gothic meets the astonishing color of after. Definitely one of my favorite YA fantasy debuts of the year so far. And actually on my list, I thought that was it, but I realized as like I'm looking at the books here that that's not it. And so for some reason, I thought I have The Last Tale of the Flower Bride, which I'm pretty sure I read in January. But it was in my pile, and I realize now that I never was able to talk about it because of the HarperCollins strike, which is now done. So I'm so excited about that. That was one of my highlights of February. But The Last Tale of the Flower Bride was an evocative, lush fairy tale story about sacrifice and ambition and love and possessiveness and pain and fear and ownership, like all of that. In a book. I am such a fan of Roshani Chokchi's books, and so I had really high hopes for The Last Tale of the Flower Bride, and 100% are all in this book. Like, it was just gorgeous writing from the very beginning. It has these fairy tale themes and these fairy tale, like, suspensions of disbelief all within this book, and it's also such an exploration of love and knowledge, and how much can you know of a person, how much do you deserve to know about a person that you love. Like all of those different themes in this fairy tale world was just so fabulous. And the last fantasy I have, which is Delicious Monsters. This is a chunky book. If for reference, I think it was over, yeah, it was over 500 pages, but this flew by. I loved Delicious Monsters so much the way that it balances the two different timelines. That's one of my favorite elements of stories in general. But it also delves into kind of forgotten girls, specifically forgotten black girls in our society, in the US society, and the ways that their stories are not told, the manipulations of people's stories after the fact. There are just so many different lenses of perception versus what's happening. So, reality versus perception versus self image. Like, all of these things were so fabulously done. As I said, the dual timeline, which explores this in more depth. In terms of the present timeline, looking at people's accounts of the past, and the past timeline having us see what we see to be the truth or we see to be what's happening. That interaction alone was something that was going to make it one of my favorite books. And I am just so shocked. I really enjoyed Blood Like Magic and Blood Like Fate, but Delicious Monsters is on an entirely new level for me. And finally, contemporary. I just have two favorites here. The first is This Time It's Real, which was such a cute, contemporary, charming story. But I think what I loved about This Time It's Real is the way that it focuses on this idea of reality versus fake, like reality versus performance. So they are fake dating, which is a trope I really love. But when does it become more about reality? When does it become less about performance? And this line, I thought that it was really beautifully done in This Time It's Real. And also the main character was just so endearing, not only in the mistakes that she makes, but also in the ways that she is looking at these fictional worlds as like modes of escape, but also wish fulfillment and like a secret romantic, but kind of like a cynic on the outside. I really personally related to that. And so This Time It's Real was just a book that ended up flying by because of how charming it was, even as things are going wrong. And finally, my adult romance favorite of the month certainly was The Neighbor Favor. I've loved Christina Forrest's book in the past, and so The Neighbor Favor was just so it was so great. I love when there are letters or I love when there are emails in books, and The Neighbor Favor has that. It's like the first half of the book, and also in the premise, is that basically you're emailing with your favorite like fantasy author, and then you develop this really deep, personal, intimate relationship. You decide to meet, they don't show up. That's like the whole first thing. And that whole first roller coaster, that whole first emotional journey that we were taken on is so compelling. And like my heart wanted to crack open. You know that it's going to happen because of the premise, but like it's still, I was so captivated. I almost forgot about the premise. But then the next part of the premise is that she meets her neighbor, her new neighbor, into the flat she's living with her sister at this point, many, months, I think months later, months if not years later. And then she has this really cute neighbor who's going to help her find a date for her sister's wedding. So that's like the second part of the thing. That's where The Neighbor Favor comes from. But this was just, I was just so swept away by the romance, but also the intricate character details, not only of the main characters, which I cannot remember their names right now off the top of my head. Oh, one is Lily, I'm pretty sure. Because I was like, oh, my name's Lily. I'm pretty sure one of the main characters' name is Lily, and I'm pretty sure the other one is Nick. But anyway, Lily's worries with publishing and trying to figure out like when the passion doesn't pay the bills. I thought it was super on topic for kind of what's been going on right now in life and also in the publishing world, and also Nick's perspective of being afraid of showing people your true self and thinking that everything's going to go wrong, basically. So those are my favorite books of February. Those were my personal life updates. And I hope you had a really fun time watching this. Please let me know down below what some of your favorite reads were of February, or if you also have tips as a fellow crochet or knitting person, what to do about this not happening in the future. That would be great. And yeah, I hope everyone has a really great rest of your reading day, week, month in March and year. And I will see you in the next video where hopefully I've caught up on my reviews. I'm not injured. I'm not sick. Fingers crossed. And everything has gone to plan after at the end of March, a very intense panel heavy month. So anyway, have a great day and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.